Jen. And again, hi everyone. I'm Monica Sari with Assessments 24/7. Welcome to our webinar. It's going to be on using DISC in a world of transitioning communication. And I'm very honored to welcome and introduce Jen Larson. She's our VP of Instructional Design and Certification. She's an author. She is a part of this book that we just put out, What Makes Humans Tick, by a handful of our leaders. She's a DISC guru. She's a podcast superstar. And she's a mom to Jack, who is 14. So please send her your prayers and good thoughts because he's a teenager now. She's coming to us from Spokane, Washington. And again, please welcome Jen Larson. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Monica. And thank you to everyone who has joined us. I still see people trickling in, and I'm so excited to be able to share this information with you and to talk about the things that, oh gosh, have been so challenging for some of us over the last several years as we transition the ways that we interact with one another. This topic has come up quite a bit. We get a lot of questions about, okay, I used to meet with people face to face, and now I just get emails, or I just get phone calls, or I'm communicating with them through a Zoom call or some other sort of modality that I'm really not used to. And I'm not shaking hands with them as much anymore. And I'm not spending time with them in a physical environment the same. And I just really don't know how to be sure that what I'm doing is still effective when I'm communicating with them. So we wanted to talk a little bit about how we can use DISC in this world of transitioning communication. And of course, as we had this all planned, we had more things happen in our global world that have put other things on our minds, other stressors, other mindsets, other concerns, other interactions that we are now dealing with. And we continue to live in this global transition for a variety of reasons and in a variety of ways. The really good news is we have things to support you in understanding how to effectively communicate with people despite what's going on. So I hope that what you'll hear today as we go through this is that what we know for sure is that effective communication is crucial to building high quality, meaningful, mutually beneficial relationships. And no matter what's going on, whatever the continued transitions we experience in our personal or professional lives, there's nothing as important as being able to effectively recognize, understand, and interact with others. It doesn't matter how we're communicating. So we're going to jump right in here and talk about what we know for sure. What we know for sure is that people generally make the mistake of assuming that others are interacting and thinking and communicating the same way we do. This is not brand new information for any of you that have been around Assessments 24/7 for more than about a minute are going to recognize what is about to happen here. Really solid reminder of why it's important. We all know the golden rule. We've all been taught many times about treating others the way that we would like to be treated. And while that's an amazing standard for interacting with people and treating others with dignity and respect, what we know is when it comes to communication, building mutually beneficial relationships is really better used with the platinum rule to treat others the way they wish to be treated. But if we don't know how they wish to be treated, how can we do this in a way that's really effective? So one of the things that we experience right now or have experienced in the past are that when we communicate with others, we use verbal, vocal, and visual cues to help us identify someone's currently expressed behavioral style. And we've learned to use what we see and what we hear and what we experience in our interactions to help us identify their style tendencies and help us to know how to move forward and adapt to what it is that they're experiencing. We know 4 core styles. We've learned about dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. We understand what they focus on the most, that the D focuses on problems and challenges. The I focuses on people and contacts. The S focuses on pace and consistency. And our C focuses on procedures and constraints. We understand the difference between guarded behaviors and open behaviors. And we're growing in being able to recognize how those behaviors are expressed. We've seen direct and indirect, and we know how to identify those styles. All of this is basic DISC information, and we have it at our fingertips. And when we can recognize these things, we know what to expect from a person who's dominance, or a person who's influence, or a person who's steadiness, or a person who's conscientious. We also know how to watch for the way that they prefer to move through life and get things done. So Ds move quickly, identifying problems and challenges and handling things with urgency. Is use friendly persuasion to reach objectives and engage with a vast network of people. S's cooperate with others to preserve a stable, harmonious, and predictable environment. And C's reach their goals by complying with the established rules, procedures, and protocols. And we know that D's and C's work to get things done and focus on tasks. And I's and S's make connections and focus on relationships. And we know that D's and I's dive in and make changes and do things quickly, especially things that are new and exciting. And S's and C's like to think before they speak and plan before they act. And we know what kind of needs, emotions, and fears we see in each of the DISC styles. And sometimes we even have a profile that shows us who this person is. Then we can take all that information or any piece of it that we have and make a judgment about what we are likely seeing in their behavioral style as they're expressing it right this minute, and engage with that appropriately so that we can interact with them and communicate with them effectively. But what happens if something's missing? So what if we don't have a verbal or a vocal or a visual cue? What if we can't easily identify someone's style? What if they haven't taken an assessment? What do we use in those cases? What can we identify and how do we do it? So my hope is over the next few minutes, you'll get some tips and tricks for using what you know and hopefully a little something new to identify the people that we're working with and how we can respond and interact with them as effectively as possible. At this point, what I want to tell you is you're doing it already. If you're using DISC now, you already know what to identify and how to do it. And just because we're doing it in a different modality doesn't change how that works. So it doesn't matter how that interaction happens, whether it's a voicemail, an email, a Zoom meeting, a phone call, or a live personal face-to-face conversation. Recognizing the DISC styles, the process that we use, and the ability to adapt to those DISC styles is still the same. We may have some pieces of information missing, so we might have to pay attention in a little different way, but we still use the same set of processes, the same identification questions, the same adaptation cycles, the same style information to understand how to be effective with other people. So my first step is to help you understand that we really just need to be present, because while the way in which we're communicating with each other is changing all the time and may be different from one day to the next, or may come in a different way than we've ever experienced before in terms of modality or interaction, we really just need to pay attention to what's going on around us, really listening, reading, and observing, taking in all of the information that's presented to us, or even the little information that's presented to us, and seeking to understand what it is that people are looking for. If you're not really listening, or you don't read the whole message, or you don't pay attention, you can't possibly hear and understand the message that's being shared. The second thing is to stay focused, relaxed, and engaged. Right now, our worlds are so stressful that staying focused, relaxed, and engaged is very, very difficult. I don't know about any of you, but I'm assuming that there's someone else out there who has a little bit of trouble staying focused, staying relaxed, or staying engaged. I personally don't feel all that relaxed most of the time right now. And I'm very, very focused on moving to the next thing, getting the next thing accomplished, having the next conversation, making sure I'm taking care of whatever is coming my way. And it's hard to be really present and stay focused in my current moment. However, maintaining awareness of that present moment and what is being said and shown is the only way that we can really identify who we're interacting with and what they need from us and how we can provide that in a way that's mutually beneficial. Thirdly, recognizing our own feelings, our own thoughts, our own actions, and our desire to respond in that moment, even if it's not the right time to express those thoughts, feelings, actions, and desires. Don't allow it to take focus away from others. Still be present in that interaction, but acknowledge where you are with that as well. Just don't let it steal your focus. The next thing that I want to talk about is being attentive. Attentiveness is a little different than being present, because we can be present but also get distracted in our attentiveness. But specifically with attentiveness, what I want to look for are the clues and cues that people do give us. And again, if we're missing something in our interaction, we might see that we don't have, or we might experience that we don't have a verbal or a visual component to our interaction. But if we're looking and listening for clues and cues, we can use what we know about DISC, even within the first few moments of our interaction, to identify some of the tendencies and emotions of a style so that we can better assess the current behavioral circumstance, their current style and approach, their current emotions. As I said a few moments ago, in an ever transitioning world, you might expect that the person that you're engaged with right now is the person that you've always engaged with. And you might notice that some of them are under a significant amount of stress and behaving slightly differently than what you expected. If we have someone that comes to us who we've always interacted with as an I, and now is under a significant amount of stress and comes to us more as a D, if we still treat them like an I, we will be less effective and we will risk a greater chance at miscommunication because we're not reading their current style. So if we are present in the moment, looking and listening for those clues and cues, we can then know how to adjust and adapt in a way that's going to work. I'm going to show you this visual because I think it's really important to hit the highlights and the reminders of our style. Because this is so simple, I think many of us say, yeah, we know that, but we forget to apply it no matter what the interaction. So while we're paying attention, the first thing that I want to remind you of is within a moment of being able to interact with someone, you'll be able to identify, are they faster paced or are they slower paced? You'll be able to identify if they're more guarded or open. You'll be able to identify if they've jumped straight into the task at hand or if they're more focused on building the relationship and working with people around them. Are they more assertive, persuasive, supportive, analytical, or a combination of those things in this present moment? And that may or may not be the same as they've always been with you. There could be a variety of reasons why they respond to their environment, their situation, or their relationship differently. And if we interact with them based on what we're seeing right now, we're going to have the greatest chance of success and effectiveness in communicating effectively. I wanted to highlight this really briefly because it's a little different look. It's kind of an overview of all of the things that we know about DISC so far. But I think when we're trying to identify styles, no matter the modality, when we see communication come in or experience communication with someone else, it can be really helpful for us to have a checklist, so to speak, of what style might be coming through. So for how they'll likely communicate, the D styles are going to be assertive, directive, use few words, bullet points, short and concise and to the point, often with little detail or explanation. The I styles are going to be friendly and persuasive and interactive and social. They're going to share a lot of information. They may even have stories that wander from topic to topic. Our S styles are going to be kind and professional, thoughtful and informative. They'll often give things in a narrative. They're very supportive, and they do tend to share step by step with a lot of details to provide that support. And our C styles are going to share information that's precise with rules and procedures, often providing pros and cons and highlighting risks and giving lots of detail, lots of analysis. Oftentimes they'll communicate this in spreadsheets. When those things come through in the ways that they're communicating, what they're really saying is, I want to know for a D style, when are we going to get this done? How can this be accomplished as quickly as possible with the least amount of effort? Let's be efficient with this and get it done. The I styles say, who's going to be involved with this? Who do I get to interact with and network with and engage with? The S styles want to know why. What's the reasoning behind this? Does it make sense? Will it be something that's supportive of the people around us? And the C styles want to know how. What are the logistics? What are the constraints? What are the expectations about how this is getting done? So one of the things that we can also do when we look at these questions of when, who, why, and how is open up our own curiosity and mindfulness. So to be curious and mindful, we can ask for clarification if there's something we don't understand. Ask for input if you're not sure in what you're understanding. Then be mindful of your own thoughts, feelings, and actions before you respond. There is a very, very brilliant man who existed in this world not long ago who used to say, make time between your stimulus and response to decide the best way to respond and interact. And when we take a moment to be curious and mindful and pay attention to how it is that we want to respond and what will be best for that interaction, we take that space between stimulus and response, we're much more likely to communicate in a way that's going to be effective. Once we've identified someone's style, then we can determine how to communicate with them in a way that works. And we all already know how to do this. We understand DIS and C. We understand what happens when someone's styles are overextended or underextended, where their needs become wants. We understand what happens when someone moves from a natural style tendency to an adapted style tendency. We know how to make adjustments for the needs of the people that we're interacting with and also get our needs met. That's what DISC teaches us and what we're so skilled in understanding already. We just need to remember that it doesn't matter where we are or how we are, we can apply those same techniques. So keeping that in mind, to effectively respond and interact with people of each of the styles, here are some tips you can use. With D styles, use strong, confident language, use direct statements, challenge and disagree openly, not necessarily in a way that's gross or nasty, but in a way that really provides additional information, insight, ideas, and allows there to be some dialogue and creating new ideas as a result of that. Don't waste time, provide options and let them decide. With our I styles, be upbeat, positive, and warm, make suggestions, share feelings and emotions, engage with them and their expressiveness, and don't rush to the task. For our S styles, develop trust and credibility over time. Give them step-by-step information in return. Be patient and don't rush them. Be friendly and professional. And for our C styles, be prepared and stay on task. Give them time to think, show them the rules and the procedures and follow them as well. Provide pros and cons also, and be open to time for thorough analysis. One of the biggest questions that I get is, okay, all that's fine and well and good, unless I can't identify what's going on. And there are some times where if someone is shifting style very quickly, or if they are a blend of styles and those styles are both very high, for example, or very low, we might see that it's harder to identify who are we interacting with. This is where I call you to be a mirror. And when you're a mirror, that means that if they're going fast, you speed up. If they're going slower, you slow down. If they're focused on the task, you get right into it. If they're wanting to interact and take a little more time, allow time for that connection. When we are mirroring, it's a pretty effective way to treat others the way that they want to be treated. And when we're paying attention and mirroring, we are present, we're attentive, we're able to be curious because we're in that moment with them so that we can respond appropriately. So in lack of having any other resource or any other knowledge of being able to know how to work with a DISC style, being a mirror is always a good choice and an effective way to interact with someone in a way that they'll know that you understand what's important to them and will communicate with them in a way that's more effective. I hope that there have been some questions so far. So I want to pause here and see if anything has been brought up just yet before we hop into the next piece.
No, nothing that we couldn't answer before, Jen, so you can go ahead and move along.
Oh, awesome. Okay. So one of the things that I really want to talk about, and that there's not a slide associated with this per se, but one of the things that I want to talk about is as I was going through what we were going to talk about today on this webinar, I thought to myself, Jen, you've said this information to these people a million times. There's nothing that's new or groundbreaking or exciting about what's here. And you know what? There isn't. And there's a really good reason for that, because the foundation of DISC is tried and true and it works all the time. And I hope that what you've seen so far is there may be a new way to apply it or a new way to think about it. But if nothing else, the reassurance that this works as it is, despite the modality, despite the level of stress, despite what's going on in the world, the ways in which we communicate with people are solid and sure. And if we understand who we're interacting with and we seek to build mutually beneficial relationships with them, you have everything you need. You already know how to work with these DISC styles. It's nothing new. It's nothing exciting. It's nothing rocket science, but it is something that works a whole lot better if we remember to apply it. And I am as guilty of this as anyone else. When I get busy doing my thing, I operate from my own style and forget that I have all these resources and all these communication tips and all these tools and all of these things to support my communication with others. I forget to look for, what does this person need from me? What are they presenting to me in the way that they're behaving so that I can respond appropriately to that? I just get busy doing Jen. And that doesn't always work as effectively as if I would pay attention and be present and focus on what I know and use my resources. So I wanted to make sure that I acknowledge that this isn't anything that you don't already have access to or don't already know. It's just a matter of us remembering to use it. That said, I think it's also important to remember that particularly now in our world, when we're experiencing a lot of stress that has gone on for a very long time, and we're continuing to transition in the things that we do, the people we interact with, the ways we interact, that we might notice that some of our styles of DISC and our blends are a little more extreme now than we have experienced in the past. When we experience a high level of stress, we immediately go to our highest natural tendencies when we respond. And because the stress has been very long-term for some of us, we tend to blow our styles out a little bit. Our highs become higher, our lows become lower. Why that's important is because when we're dealing with extreme styles, whether it's our own or in the people that we're interacting with, the ways in which we modify our adapting and embrace who they are look a little different. The second part about that I want to mention is that they won't always reciprocate. We can't expect that other people will always adapt to us, particularly if they're very high in their styles right now. It can be a lot more difficult for them to remember to adapt back. So if we have an expectation that this is going to be a two-way street all the time, we're setting ourselves up for potential miscommunication, misunderstanding. And all we can do is be a very best version of ourselves, try to put forth what we need, try to guide those around us to give us what we need. For example, if I'm a high D and I want bullet points, I need to ask for bullet points. That'll help other people know how to treat me in return rather than expecting that they'll know how to adapt back to me. So I suppose the highlight summary of all of this is, again, be curious, ask, share, give, think, do, talk, do everything that you can to try to open up your communication without making assumptions as much as possible, using the things that we know. Stay present, look at what you're seeing in their behavior right now, how they're emotionally responding to you. And probably the most important part of this is don't take it personally. We're all coming from our own lens. We're all coming from our own place, and it's rarely personal. There may be some emotions tied to things because that's our style and the way that we interact with the world, and we're human, and it's rarely personal. If it is personal, that's a different conversation, and then you can work on that as well. But if we can remove some of that level of emotion, some of that level of subjectivity, and focus on what does the person in front of me need right now, as kindly as possible, as effectively as possible, as efficiently as possible, we'll be far better off than if we are unable to identify what the person needs in front of us. And when all else fails, we can always ask. Okay, enough of that soapbox. Two more things I want to share with you. The first is what's coming up. I know people are always really excited about this part. So what's coming up? We've made some updates to our DISC and Motivators resources the last couple of months. So if you haven't been into your trainer materials for a while, please go take a look. There's some interesting things in there, some new things in there, some newly branded things in there. Check it out. And in this PowerPoint that you're receiving, you'll notice that these are all hyperlinks. So if you don't know how to get there, when you get the PowerPoint, you can click on them directly. The second thing that I wanted to bring up is our kids disc. And we've talked about this a few times over the course of the last several months, how we've launched Kid Disc using the birds, and it is fire. People love it. If you have not checked it out yet, please go check it out. It is awesome. We get such good feedback about how it's representing the children that are coming up in our world and how parents and teachers and coaches are able to use this information to better identify the kiddo that they're working with. And we're finding that kids are feeling really empowered by the information that's presented in this report to help them help others see who they are and understand what they need and what they're experiencing. So great. We also have an adult version of the birds that go along with the kids disc assessment. So it's something that if you have children or if you interact with children, you can also share your bird information with them. If you're interested in that, let us know. Again, this is hyperlinked, so you can go right to the page and check out our kids disc and the associated reports that come with it. And then lastly, Assessments 24/7 is going to ATD 22 in Orlando coming up in May. So if you're going to be there, please come say hi to us. A bunch of us are going to be there manning the booth, and we would love to have the opportunity to interact with you and meet you and say hi if you're going to be around. Lastly, if any of this has been interesting to you, if you have questions about things, if you want to dive in further, if you want to continue to grow your knowledge, which we hope you will, there's always practitioner certification in DISC if you don't have it already. If you're interested in that, on this slide, it's hyperlinked as well, so you can get to our certification site. We have a lot of webinars that we've done previously that you can find on our homepage under resources and webinars. There's a variety of information there that we've posted on webinars we've done in the past. I encourage you to check them out if you've missed any. And then finally, as Monica mentioned at the beginning, our book has been launched. It's doing really well. People seem to be really loving it and thinking that it's really helpful for their businesses. I even have messages from kids of practitioners and people who are using the book who have said, my kid uses this to teach their friends, which I have to say, as one of the authors, I am loving that people are sharing this information and talking about this information at any age. Last thing that I'll share before we get to some questions is if you have questions at all, if there's anything we can do to support you, if there's any other things that you're interested in learning about, in addition to sharing that information on the survey, we always encourage you to contact us at hello@assessments24x7.com. So I'm really grateful for you all hanging in here with me today. I'm happy to answer any questions that may have come through.
Okay.
Oh, Kathy, do you want to take it? Sorry.
Yeah, well, I'll just have one, and then Suzette, if you want to read the remainder, then we could just keep it consistent. So one of the ones, Michael asked, how would you compare DISC with MBTI? Common question.
Very common question. So there are lots of different ways that we could talk about the relationships between MBTI and DISC. Both of them are very cool assessments. There's lots of information that's provided in each of them. And we have a document on our website under our resources that talks specifically about the comparisons of DISC to MBTI. What I will tell you based on the feedback that I have received and heard in the industry is that DISC is something that's easier to remember and apply. It's based on 4 styles rather than 16. So for a lot of people, they have a hard time remembering their MBTI letters. They don't always remember what they all mean. And if they can remember their own, they definitely have a hard time remembering other people's. DISC is a little bit more simple to apply immediately, to remember, to understand. So in our experience, DISC is just a little easier for a lot of people to identify and apply. MBTI still has great things to offer, but DISC seems to be something that is a little bit more mainstream and a little bit more user-friendly. The second thing is, and this is something that I would absolutely encourage everyone to look into despite what assessment or what vendor you use, is look for validity studies, because validity studies are a really important part of understanding the assessments that are presented. You want to make sure that they are showing and measuring what they say they're showing and measuring. MBTI's validity studies are very interesting to look at. Our DISC validity studies are very interesting to look at. And as you do more research on those validity studies, you'll find where the benefits are in each of those assessments to look for what assessment might be best for your client needs.
Okay, second question. I liked this one. Maybe you have some good ideas for this, Jen. So from Leanne, I've worked in environments where the DISC style profile was displayed on the office doors or in the cube. Now that we're virtual, how have you seen this info shared with styles in a virtual way?
Oh, great question. So I've actually seen it in a lot of different ways. So if we're doing a face-to-face Zoom interactive meeting, for example, you can put their DISC style, or they can put their DISC style next to their name at the bottom of the little screen. So if I were to update mine, we'll rename me. I am Jen SC. My primary styles are S and C. I'm overextended in both, so I'm really, really, really high. I know many of you probably think I'm an I. That does come into play on occasion, but I am mostly S and C. So you can have them put it right here in the Zoom. The other thing that you could do is take a moment, even on calls where you know people, and just have them say, what style am I in right now? So maybe right now I'm more of an I. I would say, well, today I'm feeling my I energy. I'm feeling a little more excited, a little more energetic, a little more engaging. Versus if you caught me on a day where I was writing content from an instructional design perspective, I'm probably going to be more of a C. Very different interaction, very different expectation, very different kind of environment and feel for my style. So I've seen it done that way. I've also seen it done where people have something either on their background. So you can upload a virtual background that says something about your style or that represents your style. For example, I had a meeting with a woman once and she had on her background a Ferris wheel because she wanted people to know that she was a high I and she liked to have fun. So you could do things like that. So you can get very creative with the ways that you share it. Usually though, one of my favorite ways to do it is to have people guess, what style do you think I am today? Based on a short interaction. That also gives us the chance to practice identifying styles. So someone could say, wow, the way that you're acting right now seems a little D to me. Is that right? Are you focused on getting some stuff done? And that gives you an opportunity to keep it fresh in your conversation too. Great question.
Jen, I was going to add, I have clients that use it on their Slack channel or whatever, digital messaging that they use. You can put it just like what we did here on Zoom. You can put it as a part of your name on Slack too.
We also, in our company, have added it to our signatures. So if anybody's received an email from us lately, you might have noticed that we have it in our signatures. I'll pull mine over here to the screen. Hopefully you can see it. Let me zoom in. It's right down here. My SCI showing up right there in the signature. So you can also do that too. And then people will just know who they're dealing with. Great questions. What else have we got, Suzette?
Yes, so we have quite a bit. And just a reminder for everyone, if you're putting your question in the chat, it's most likely disappearing and we're not able to get to it because so many people are commenting and it's just not very good organization over there for me to get to questions. So if you have a question, please put it in the question and answer area and we're going to try to get to kind of first come, first serve. Next question is there a dream matchup style for styles in the workplace? For example, do D's and C's make a killer team? I's and S's, S's and C's, etc.
Yes. However, it is not a predictable relationship for success. It depends on the environment. It depends on the styles of the people you're working with. It depends on the leadership. It depends on what your goals and outcomes are. There are all different sorts of power teams based on different styles. And actually at the end of the DISC assessment, there's a worksheet there that will help you identify different people and different styles and talk about their strengths so that you can leverage those strengths. The reality is any style can be effective in any environment. However, for some styles, they have to use extra energy to be able to be effective in an environment that's not natural for them. So for example, if you've got a person who is slower paced and more task focused, and you put them in a position that's fast paced and people focused, they can still be very effective. It's just going to take a lot of energy from them to be able to do so. So there's no really tried and true, this is the best combination of people to interact with one another. There are lots of ways that you could interact and build and grow a team with a variety of behavioral styles, depending on what your purpose is, what your goals are, how those people are focused. And for people that naturally are inclined to one style over another, or two styles over another, or three styles over another, you can still leverage their skill sets and their strengths. It may just take a little more effort and energy for them to do something that's a little bit outside of their natural tendency. If people have the opportunity to behave in their natural tendencies, it's going to be easier for using that energy to do the things that they're naturally gifted with. But that's not to say people can't adapt. So it's kind of a tricky question because the answer is yes.
Awesome. And then we have another one. Will the extreme behavior we've been seeing since the pandemic started, about 20% higher, will that stabilize and go back down eventually?
Gosh, I hope so. Gosh, I hope so. So the way that we have seen it work in the past, now granted, in the past has not ever, in my lifetime anyway, looked like this. There have been circumstances over the past that we've seen stress in our world and people responding behaviorally and emotionally, but it's not ever been like this. So to predict what this is going to look like at the end of it is hard to say. But based on what we know to be true about humans and behavior and emotions and all of the things that we have seen in the past, it's kind of like a pendulum swing. So if we sit in the center, balanced in our style, whatever our natural style is, and we adapt our style here and there for environment, situation, or relationship, We're kind of living in our centered self, so to speak, whatever that looks like for us. When we experience extreme stress, it's like taking a pendulum of a clock and swinging it. And depending on where we swing to, for whatever reason, whatever we determine is most acceptable, effective, required in those situations, environments, or relationships, that pendulum can swing all over the place. Ideally, as the stress and we have the chance to decompress, as all that levels out, that pendulum will come back to that place where we find a little more balance. That's probably going to take some significant time. And the reality is, for some of us, our pendulum won't swing back to exactly the same spot. Hopefully it'll get close, because as we remember, DISC is built on a combination of nature and nurture. So some of who we are is just ingrained in who we are. Doesn't mean we don't respond to the things around us that may impact that. Things like our safety, our understanding of the world around us, the relationships that we experience, those can all have a profound effect on us. And I know that you probably have all heard of, or even know someone who's gone through a particularly stressful event and has kind of changed their approach, changed their behavior, changed their outlook on life, and made some significant adjustments. And so their style might look a little different than it did before. So yes, I would anticipate we're going to see some of these things swing back to a little bit more of a balance. I don't know when that'll be. And it doesn't mean that everybody's going to go back exactly to where they were, because the reality is everything around us has changed. That changes us too. Great questions.
I wanted to add to that too. A lot of our clients are encouraging folks to retake the disc if it was, last taken before the pandemic, because you may see changes in the last few years.
Yeah. And I also want to add to that, even though this is more of a disc focused conversation, we'll also see those same kinds of adjustments in things like our emotional intelligence, our motivation, the ways in which we value the world around us. Sometimes that all shifts up when we go through times like this, where we're transitioning significantly or where we've had a significant emotional experience. So you might notice that other assessments outputs are changing as well, or the way that you feel about things might look different, or the way you express yourself in certain ways look different. Kind of like the way that we change our styles through seasons of life. So who I was as a teenager, or who I was in my 20s, is very different than who I am as a mom in my 40s. That's just the progression of life. And we notice those same kinds of things happen in all of the different pieces of holistic people that we measure: emotional intelligence, critical thinking, etc.
Love it. Good information. We do have the question kind of coming up, I noticed in chat and in the questions, so this will be good to go over, is the age ranges for kids disc. Everyone kind of wants to know that. And then in the same question with Linnell, do you have a percentage of each style overall in the US? So you could tell them a little bit about our available, offering for that as well.
Sure. So there are some appropriate ages for using kids disc. Somebody else may have to confirm this with me, because it's not my area of expertise, but I believe it's 7 or 8 at the youngest. Is that right, Suzette?
That's correct. It's roughly about 8, but it really depends on the child.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So if you know that your child is far more capable and advanced and can understand the questions, that's really the biggest key, is do they have an awareness of self in such a way that they can answer the questions truthfully and honestly. The questions are not difficult, but for some kiddos, it does require a little bit of help explaining some things, just because depending on where you are in your own development and where your kiddos are in their development, they may have some perceptions of words that are a little different, or they may not be introduced to those words yet. So 7 or 8 typically is where we start, and you can go up to age 14. At age 14, we start to look at, is it appropriate to measure them in the adult disc, in the more standard version of disc? And again, that's going to depend on the kiddo, depending on how well they are self-aware and perceiving, what different words mean and things like that. So great question. And then when it comes to the population, we actually have one of our resources is a map of the world that shows disc styles based on how people have answered the assessments. Everyone who's taken the DISC assessment with us is accounted for in that. So if that's something that you're interested in having, send an email to hello, or go to our resources site and you can pull up the DISC map. It's also in our trainer materials as well.
Perfect. And then we have one last question. I'm not as familiar with this one, but maybe you will be, Jen. Many in the market are excited about NLP communication. What's the difference between NLP and DISC?
I don't know what NLP is. So that's a new one for me. I'm excited to try to figure out what that's about.
Yeah, I don't know, Kathy, are you familiar with that one? That one wasn't familiar with me either.
I'm not. I was trying to look it up so that I could answer that question.
Me too.
So many other questions, but Brenda, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the only thing I can find is natural language processing test.
Oh, look, everyone answered us in the answer section, in the question.
Neuro-linguistic
Oh, look at him go.
There we go. Neuro-linguistic programming.
That's not.
Yeah, we're not familiar.
We're not a part of that.
Yeah, I don't know anything about that assessment or what it measures or how it measures it. I'm definitely going to have to start looking into it now because that's not something that I'm familiar with, but I'm excited to try to check it out.
Perfect.
Manny says it's not very similar to DISC. So thank you for that, Manny.
We're into psychometric assessments over here.
That's right. Do we have any others?
No, that looks like it was it. I'm just scrolling through to make sure. And then everyone, I know you had questions about like adding the kids disc assessment to your account and different things about your account. If you have an assessment account with us, go ahead, email us at hello@assessments24x7.com for any account questions about becoming certified with us, any of that stuff we will answer for you really quickly. Just email us there and we will help you out. But I'll let Jen and Monica wrap it up.
I was just going to say thank you so much, Jen. The updates that were made to these slides are really valuable. I really liked what you did, and I think everyone on this call can use those in their practice as well. So thank you so much for all of your knowledge.
Thank you, Monica. I'm just really happy to be able to share it. And like I said earlier, I realize that for those of you who are consistent webinar attendees who love us and join us all the time, we're so grateful for you. And I know that just because of how I am, and I assume a lot of people are like me, get it from the beginning, assuming people are like us, that there's a chance that you guys forget some of this stuff too. And that it's always a good reminder that we're just humans and that we have lots of resources to support us. And sometimes we don't use them as effectively as we ought to, but really we have everything that we need to be successful. Sometimes it's a matter of just mindfully applying it in a new way. So I hope that this has been helpful. I hope that it's a good reminder, or if nothing else, just reassurance that we're exactly where we can be and ought to be in this moment. We have everything as a resource available to us to use to help have the best conversations, the best interactions that we can. We just need to remember to leverage our resources. And if there's something that you're missing, there's likely someone else out there in the world who'd be happy to help you, partner with you, show you some things, teach us some stuff. And there's nothing wrong with being a curious learner. So if nothing else, I hope that you take away that you're not alone. We're all in this together. There's lots of resources to support us. And yes, the world is transitioning and it can be very, very difficult to navigate, but we have a solid foundation of what we know works. We just have to remember to use it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jen. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thanks, team. We'll see you again next time. Take care.